Hey guys, Vesper here with another video, and this time we're going to talk about a very popular topic, which is regular controllers and joysticks for Mortal Kombat X. I'm going to give you guys my personal thoughts on it, as well as some tips for you guys as well. So the most common question people ask me is, do I use the regular controller for Mortal Kombat X or do I use a joystick? And at the moment I'm using a regular PlayStation 4 controller. The second most common question people ask me is, do I use the D-pad on the controller or do I use the joystick on the controller? And I use the D-pad. Now, let me give some thoughts I have on using a controller for Mortal Kombat X. Using a controller is completely fine. Xbox or PS4, even keyboard is fine, man, because Mortal Kombat X has very simple commands in terms of special moves. There's also a very little amount of commands that require pressing two buttons at the same time. So it's nothing crazy like in Street Fighter where we have to constantly do focus attacks and EX commands and double motion for supers and things like that. Using a controller is completely fine, and I think there's very few weaknesses, and that's why I use controller myself at the moment. So the first tip I can give you guys is, if you use a regular controller, is to use the D-pad over the joystick. Now, Mortal Kombat, it's not like Smash Brothers where you need, like, when you barely push the joystick in, you'll walk, and then if you push all the way, you run. There's nothing like that. It's either you walk forward or you don't. It's just on or off. So I think using the joystick on the controller is, you do a lot of unnecessary movement. Another thing too is it's kind of tough to kind of tell exactly which direction you are pressing because it's a joystick, and it rotates a full 360 degrees. Whereas the D-pad is, you know exactly which button you're pressing and thus which direction you're pressing. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. So overall, I think a quick tip is, if you guys are new to this, to use the D-pad. Now, that doesn't mean the D-pad has some weaknesses either. So one weakness of the D-pad on a controller is the fact that there are some diagonal directions you have to press. For example, jumping forward and jumping back, you have to press diagonal and you're using your thumb. And sometimes, rarely, I'll jump straight up rather than jumping forward or back because I accidentally pressed one of the buttons before the other. So that's one really small example of a weakness with the D-pad. But overall, like I said, there's not really too much in Mortal Kombat. When I play Street Fighter on regular controller, I only play on controller when I'm forced to. If I go to my friends and there's no joystick lying around, I hold the controller in a claw. I don't hold it like a regular way like people do with their thumbs out like this. I claw it down and I place the controller on my lap and I play like this, as if the controller is a joystick. So I have access to my buttons, the two facing ones, so I can do my EX moves easily, focus like this, and my throws. But you don't need to do that for Mortal Kombat X, you can just hold it the regular way. And like I said before, there's not difficult commands. It's easy to run because you just tap forward, and it's much easier to do on the D-pad than on the stick. And on top of that, there's very few quarter circle motions because all the quarter circle motions in the game are just down forward. You can just press down forward, and that's why a keyboard is good for Mortal Kombat X as well. You can still do the slide if you want to, and I personally play on alternate controls, so I still do like half circles and stuff on control if I want. Now, that doesn't mean that joystick doesn't have a small advantage either. There are a lot of pros that play Mortal Kombat X that play on controller and joystick. But right now I'm playing the game pretty casually, nothing hardcore. But if I was someone who entered a ton of tournaments and I wanted to play at a really high level, me personally, I would switch to joystick because I am a joystick user myself. And I feel that, small things like the triggers give me a problem, which I'll talk about in a second, and things like, me jumping straight up by accident, stuff like that. So, one weakness with the controller, besides the D-pad, what I just talked about, is the triggers. The triggers are, they're pretty sensitive, but the problem is that there's a different amount of, how should I put this, pressure you have to put down the button than the regular face buttons. So we want to do an enhanced attack, which is block and one of the punches or kicks at the same time. Sometimes you'll get one or the other before, so you'll get a block first, or sometimes it just won't come out because it's kind of clunky because you have to press them both at the same time, and your index finger is pushing down, different amount of pressure than your thumb is on the buttons. So I personally mess up on enhanced attacks all the time because of this. It's actually really annoying. So another tip I can give you guys is to flip these buttons around. So switch your, what would be R2? Your interactable and your block button. So your block button would be your R1 instead of your R2, and your R2 would be your interactable instead of the R1. So that's another good tip I can give you guys, because these are just regular buttons just like these ones, so you should honestly get a huge improvement from that as well. The buttons on the other side you don't really need to switch, because block is something that you'll commonly be pressing with other buttons at the same time. And this is the same for Xbox controller as well. Like, you know, the D-pad is pretty much the same, man. You can feel exactly which direction you're pressing. I still prefer it over using the joysticks on the controller. And then this has triggers too, so same thing. It would cause the same amount of problems by pressing the button and the trigger for your enhanced attacks. So it might be better to flip it to the top paddles here. Alright, so you guys are looking at one of my joysticks here. If you're wondering which one this is the Hori Fighting Edge for the PlayStation 3. In case you guys didn't know, you can use PlayStation 3 joysticks on Mortal Kombat X for your PlayStation 4, as long as you have your PlayStation 4 controller plugged in at the same time with your joystick. So keep that in mind, very important if you don't know. So the reason I don't use joystick, once again, is that it's just kind of overkill for me. You know, it's uncomfortable to use joysticks sometimes, especially when it's like really loud and noisy when I'm recording my videos. I just like the comfort of the pad right now. I think it's just overkill right now. Anyways, I'll give you guys some tips on how to set up your buttons for Mortal Kombat X. Two most common setups people do is that the first 4 buttons is your punches and your kicks. So the top left would be front punch, then back punch, and then the bottom button would be front kick and then back kick. And then your block button would go on the either top or bottom. Keep in mind that some joysticks have only 6 buttons like this. So most people put their block button on the bottom part, because to do your X-ray, it's the kicks and block at the same time, so all 3. So you just go like this, really easy. Throw would be, you know, punch, kick at the same time, and if you want to use your interactable, it's the 2 punches at the same time like this. So you pretty much have all your buttons set up there. Some people might want to put their block on the top right, because their character has a lot of enhanced moves that use the punches, so it's more convenient for their fingers to be at the top here. So, but to do an X-ray, you know, not everyone does X-rays, obviously, but, you know, it'd be kind of awkward because you have to do some crazy, you know, thing here. Another setup people do is they'll put the 4 buttons on the second row, basically. So your front punch, front kick, back kick in the middle, and then the block would be here, where your light kick button if you're playing Street Fighter, because that way your finger can rest on the block button all the time, your thumb, while you're playing. It feels really awkward to me, but I have seen some people do that. So 2 really easy setups to keep in mind. Like I said, you can add the rest of the buttons you want, but all you really need, the most important, is block, obviously, and the punches and the kicks. So to quickly summarize this entire video, do I use controller? Yes, I use controller, and I use the D-pad. And if you guys use regular controller, whether it's PlayStation 4 or the Xbox, I highly suggest you use the D-pad. You'll see improvement. Also, you might want to try switching the buttons, your interactable and your block button, because that way your block button's not on the triggers and you can do your enhanced attacks better. So that will improve your execution. Now for joystick, don't forget that block and the face 2 punches and the 2 kick buttons are the most important, because you got shortcuts. For X-ray, it's 2 kicks and block. For interactable, it's the 2 punches. And for throw, it's front punch and front kick at the same time. So like those 2 setups I showed you guys before. Now, if you're thinking of buying a joystick just for Mortal Kombat X and it's the only fighting game you play, I think it's kind of overkill. You're not going to see a massive improvement. Also, if you're a keyboard user, that is completely fine, man. The game is totally made for keyboard and controller for sure. You don't have to worry about there's barely any diagonal inputs. So just having the keys is completely fine. One common question you guys are going to ask me, I know for sure, is what kind of joystick should you guys buy? Man, that's like an entire different video, man. That's just going to take me too long to explain. But the most common is Mad Catz and Hori joysticks, for sure. So that's it for the video, guys. Really short here. Let me know what you guys personally use for Mortal Kombat X. And if you guys have any more questions, please leave a comment. Take it easy, guys. Peace.